Welcome back to One Comic Book a Day, where we're covering Superboy Issue 8, When Superboy Was Superbaby. You can make the argument this is probably Superman's. Probably just easier to call him Superman right now, in regards to it being his, first ever adventure. The first time he ever defeated Crooks. This story suffers from having a clunky segue that sort of connects the first act and the second act. The story would have been better if they could have fleshed it out a bit and do maybe 2 issues. The first issue being what the first half of this comic is, and the second issue being what the second half of the comic is. As it stands, with the page constraint of only doing a 1-issue story, it doesn't quite gel right when they connect. So the first half of the story is, once again, sort of a retelling of the origin story, but not like a great retelling of the origin story. It does show him crash landing, and sort of what we usually do when we tell his origin story, showing him with the Kents using his powers and them being shocked by it. Just a lot more of that. It also ignores the orphanage aspect of the origin story, which I think is now completely gone from Superman. Whenever they tell the origin story, there is no orphanage involved. Though I'm probably going to be proven wrong with another retelling of the origin story in the future, because they really love going back to this. It is interesting to see how each one of his superpowers developed, especially the fact they kind of always ignore the later powers, like his heat vision or super breath, in relation to them just kind of like seeing him fly or use his super strength. But there is sort of a sense of awe and danger to him using his superpowers and them not quite understanding what to do with them. There's even sort of a conversation between them and the baby, essentially, toddler Clark Kent, about his heat vision and being wary of fire, trying to instill things, but they can never get to the moment of why Pa Kent is important, of instilling the values and why he should be using his superpowers to help people. He's still very small and doesn't have a particularly developed brain yet, so it's hard to instill caution with his powers. And that in itself is an actually interesting conflict to have with the Kents, but that is not what the story ends up being about. About halfway through the story, we then have to transition into an actual story involving him defeating criminals. And the first time I read this, I wasn't a huge fan of this section of the story. I've thought more about it. It does succeed in what I want from Golden Age stories, which is just being fun. I think the real problem is the transition doesn't quite work. They leave him alone with a babysitter. He sees a bright light while she's sleeping. He pulls out a street light and accidentally causes an accident when criminals swerve out of the way to not hit him standing in the street. They pick him up and bring him into essentially a hostage situation. And that is what the second half of the story is. I kind of want to refer to it as Baby's Day Out, but that's not quite right. He's not really getting himself into shenanigans that blow up in these guys' face. They just accidentally bring in a super baby into the crime, and he gets annoyed at them and uses his powers in ways that they don't put together as him screwing them over. It's fun enough, but because the story is essentially 2 separate stories that could have worked together in longer formats, not a lot of attention can be given to either section of the story. So a lot of what happens is just a series of things happening over and over again, from him using his powers from the first time and the Kents being surprised, to the criminals screwing up because their gun is too hot or something else happens to them because of Superboy, which is not particularly a very interesting set of a story. We get into the problem with these 1-issue stories that can only be told in 12 to 13 pages, sometimes just kind of feeling like a montage to just a series of things happening than an actual story. But there is quite a bit of enjoyment of seeing Superbaby kind of mess around with these criminals, whose massive mistake was swerving out of the way to not kill the baby, and then bringing him into the crime. But there is, I should say, one little element that sort of fleshes out the characters more than I care to admit early on. The Kents, after getting him back, make sure that he restores the street light to its original spot. Though I'm not 100% certain how it's still working. Okay, that is it from Superboy Issue 8 in the first story, When Superboy Was Superbaby. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, hit the bell icon to get notifications when new video goes up. I do this Monday through Friday, but Fridays is Bat Friday, where I cover a Batman story in either Detective Comics or Batman. And until next time, let's ponder the question, whatever did happen to the boy of tomorrow. And when are we really going to get into like fleshing out his early days as a child and having to learn his powers? They are really like missing the ball at telling the story. It's such an obvious story to tell. Okay, have a great day.